Hello, my name is Sarah Holland. Welcome to the Fertile Mindset podcast. Each week on the podcast, we'll explore how your mind can help you create a meaningful and happy life. And through the conversations here, we'll be planting seeds of inspiration to bring you more clarity, purpose, and joy. This podcast is for you if you've ever felt stuck or unsatisfied with life and know that you want to live in a bigger and more beautiful way. I hope you enjoy the time you spend with us. Let's begin. Hello and welcome back to the Fertile Mindset podcast. I hope you are well and having a good week so far. Now, if you're listening to this on the day of release, on the Thursday, then I am on my way to Sarajevo, which is the capital of Bosnia. I've been there several times in the past. The first time was back in 2004, so 20 years ago now, and I was volunteering with a charity called Healing Hands Network. At the time, I was a reflexologist. I also practiced a little bit of EFT tapping, and I used to go out there for 2 weeks each year supporting the survivors of the Bosnian War. It was deeply moving and humbling work, and as well as going out for these volunteering trips, I also like to combine it with trips and holidays to visit the country as well, because it is a beautiful country with such warm and friendly people. And I'm really excited to be going back again, this time with two very special friends. And if you'd like to follow my trip over there and learn more about Sarajevo, feel free to go and look at my Instagram stories at fertile_mindset. I will be sharing lots over there in the coming days. And while I'm now travelling today through the power of pre-recording, I'm very excited now to be bringing you another chat with a guest who I know that you will love listening to and hearing about her story, because today I'm speaking to Janey Lee Grace. I met Janey through mutual friends, and I've enjoyed getting to know her and learning about her eclectic career, which now has a big focus on alcohol-free living. Janey is so passionate about this topic, and what I find interesting is that she approaches it from the perspective of grey area drinking that I think many of us can relate to. See what you think as you listen. This conversation isn't about asking you to give up drinking alcohol. It's more to invite you to reflect on your relationship with alcohol and to hear about Janey's own story and what led her to this place. So, Janey Lee Grace is a life coach trained in NLP, EFT, my favourite, matrix and family constellations therapy, plus sobriety and health coaching. She runs a community called the Sober Club and offers one-to-one coaching and group sessions. Formerly, she was a broadcaster, best known as a co-host on Steve Wright in the Afternoon on BBC Radio 2. She is the author of 5 books on holistic living, including 2 #1 Amazon bestsellers. Janey has a degree in performance arts. She was a backing singer with Wham and had a top 10 hit with Cola Boy in 1991. I hope you enjoy listening to this conversation, which takes us on a journey through Janey's professional and personal life, which is both fascinating and inspiring, showing us that we can find our purpose and ways to support others through our own life experiences and learnings. Hello, Janey. Thank you so much for joining me on the podcast. It's lovely to have you here. How are you today?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you. Thanks for inviting me. I really appreciate it.
Oh no, I knew that I wanted to feature you on the podcast. So we only met properly a few months ago, didn't we?
Yeah.
And I've been really inspired by your own personal story, your journey through your career, how you're working now. And I know that you have so much to share, and it will be interesting and inspiring to our listeners, I'm sure. So shall we start by hearing a little bit about who you are and what the work is that you're doing right now?
Sure. So that's a difficult one because I never quite know where to start. So I do wear quite a lot of hats. I do lots of different things, but I started as a singer, did lots of touring as a singer, and then I went into radio. Some people might know me from Radio 2. I was a presenter on Radio 2 for 24 years. How scary is that? With Steve Wright in the Afternoon. And then throughout all of that, I have also been focusing very much on holistic living. And so my first book, Imperfectly Natural Woman, was the number 1 Amazon bestseller, and that was a scary 16 years ago. And that was the book that kind of kickstarted another career alongside of the others, as it were. So I run a website called Imperfectly Natural, where I recommend holistic brands and products and services, and I have awards every year. And then in addition, I do kind of media training for holistic professionals, mainly because I love helping people recognize that they can absolutely get out there, and promote what they do without, feeling that they're not confident enough. And then my most recent work is the work that I do with the Sober Club. So I ditched the booze 6 and a bit years ago. Despite being queen of holistic living, I had been stepping around a huge elephant in the room that was alcohol. And when I finally cracked that, I realized, actually it is part of everything that I do. So I gave a TEDx talk and then decided to start the Sober Club, which is a platform, very totally non-judgmental, offering sort of well-being and inspiration for people who are drinking more than they want to, and just sort of inspiring people to live their best life without the booze. And I also host a podcast. So that's a fair bit of it.
Wow.
We have probably do for now.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's quite a lot.
It's an eclectic career, isn't it?
You've
gone in lots of different directions. And I'm curious where that kind of all began and how you found yourself on that path and how the changes came about. Like, did you always know, for example, you said you started in music. Was that what you always wanted to do? And did you ever dream of being a DJ? Like, how did this path kind of take shape for you?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I knew exactly what I wanted to do, but I think from quite a young age, I knew that I didn't want to do what my parents had probably thought I should do, which is kind of stay at home and work in a local store or a local factory. I knew from a very early age that I had completely different expectations. I felt really quite ambitious and driven, really, even as a kid. I don't know where it came from, but I just knew that I wanted to do something artistic, something creative. I was very good at art when I was a kid, so initially I thought that would be my path, and I actually got a place at university to do art. But then at the same time, I was really interested in performance, and I was a dancer, and so I decided to do a degree in performance arts, and I was majoring in dance. But then I realized that was way too much like hard work, and I really just was not very good. So I kind of moved over to music. And then I really was focused for a long time on just being a pop star. I just really wanted to be a pop star. That was everything to me. So I suppose I kind of got my dream in a sort of way, doing, having a kind of pop career. And the radio thing came about really almost by accident, because I forget even what was going on. I was doing various bits of session work and session singing, but I was looking for something else. I didn't know exactly what. And then I literally heard an ad one day on BBC Radio London, which was then called GLR. And it was my favourite station, and an ad came on saying, would you like to produce and present in radio? There's a free course being offered to teach you all the basics of radio production and presentation. But you have to be under 21 and you have to live in Vauxhall. And
wow.
I remember very specific. I remember hearing this ad and thinking, oh, wow, that's interesting. I'd just been doing a tour of radio stations promoting a single that I had out of my own, which was a dance record. And I'd done a little bit of, not exactly presenting, but the DJ had often said, oh, do you want to read these letters out or do this, do that? And I'd really enjoyed being in the radio station. So suddenly this ad came on and I suddenly thought, oh, wow, that's exactly what I'd be interested in. I can do that. I can read out loud. So I wrote a letter. Of course, it was literally a letter in those days. I wrote a letter and said, I really want to do this training. And however, well, first of all, I said, I really want to do this training. And as the BBC, I don't think it's a really, really good that you are areaist and ageist. I was so ahead of my time. But then, of course, I said, P.S., I'm only joking. I completely understand that you have to get your funding from somewhere. So please, can you give me details of a course that I can pay for? And then I got a phone call from this fabulous, beautiful man who literally changed the course of my life. And he just sort of said, oh, is that the very cheeky Janey? And I said, hello, yes. And he said, well, I like your cheek, basically. Come on the training. So the fact that I was too old and didn't live in Vauxhall never got discussed. And I went and did the training, and that was the beginning of my addiction to radio, this time a healthy addiction. And just never looked back, really. I just absolutely loved it. As soon as I kind of hit upon radio, I knew that I'd never, ever stop doing that kind of work,
Wow. And like you say, it's 24 years, you said.
Well, it's 24 years I've been on radio too. It's 28, 30 since I started in radio. Yeah.
It's amazing the twists and turns life can take, isn't it? Just from seeing that ad and then having the courage to apply anyway when you didn't fit the criteria.
I think that's kind of been a little bit of a story of my life, really. If I really want something, I really don't let anything hold me back.
Yeah, and to let your personality shine through at the same time, and give a little bit of yourself in that letter, because in any job or course or whatever it is, they get lots of applications, and it's helping your own personality to shine through is only going to be a bonus, isn't it, when they're
I think so.
Who to choose.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's kind of the, I probably didn't realize it at the time, but I was literally kind of setting an intention that was going to work.
Yeah. And I know kind of recently, but a big part of your career has been the natural and holistic living, and a big part of your life as well. So how did that come about? Because I feel like you were kind of ahead of your time there with your books that were published and before the whole world kind of got switched on to natural living.
Yeah. So what happened for me was I was relatively interested in sort of nutrition and mindset and various bits and bobs. But then it really ramped up when I got pregnant with my first child. I had my kids really late. And so it's nearly 26 years ago when I got pregnant with my first child, completely by accident. And because I hadn't thought I wanted any children. And suddenly when I found I was pregnant, I really wanted children. So I went on this sort of massively steep learning curve from 0 to 100 in a few days of like, oh my goodness, what even is this? How do I do this? And I knew straight away that I needed, I wanted to do this as holistically as possible. So I literally inhaled everything there was on natural pregnancy and birth and just about everything else. And literally that's when everything changed for me, because as I recognized the importance of sort of being as natural as you can in pregnancy, it made me realize that applies to everything. And if I'm not gonna, if I don't want to dye my hair during pregnancy, why would I do it afterwards? So I sort of went on a very steep learning curve and realized that I really needed to change a lot of things and really focus on sustainability and natural living in every area. So that's when it all kicked off. And then I became just really passionate about it. And I was by then I was working on, or certainly a couple of years after Sonny was born, I was working on Steve Wright's show, and we chatted a lot about our own lives and our sort of personal stuff, and I would find myself talking about stuff to do with natural living a lot, 'cause it was a big part of my life. And actually it was quite funny because I'd be there talking about eco balls for laundry, or organic food or whatever it might be, and hoppy ear candles, whatever. And the guys would kind of take the mick and you fade the mic down, and take the mickey out of me. But actually, of course, I got masses of emails and calls from people saying, actually, I'm really interested. Can I really find a natural deodorant? Is it really possible? And I got so many calls. And then a publisher came to me and said, have you thought about writing a book? You must be answering a lot of personal emails. And I said, well, yeah, I am. But no, I hadn't thought of writing a book. I don't think I'm a writer. And she said, well, you probably can write because you know your stuff, and if you really can't, we'll help you. So that's how that career came about. Really, I was just amazed to find that yes, I could write, thankfully. And my first book came out in 2006, just as my fourth child was born. I don't recommend launching a big book and having a baby at the same time. It's really not a very good idea. But anyway, that was the book that kind of changed everything. So yeah, I was quite ahead of my time in some ways, because that book, now I think back, it was, it was like a bit of a Bible of everything holistic. And I had been on such a massive learning curve myself. So there wasn't much I didn't cover in there, and I sometimes joke that I was talking about coconut oil and kale before they had their own publicists, so I was ahead of my time. Yeah, it is interesting now to see how so many things have caught up, but there are still things that I talk about in that book that are only just becoming quite popular in recent years. Things like far infrared machines. I was talking about that in 2006. So yeah, but that was definitely the book that kickstarted it all.
And your first child to thank for that then, if this was a
exactly.
whole new world that was opened up to you.
Totally.
Isn't that interesting though? And as you know, a lot of my background has been in fertility support and supporting women while they're trying to conceive, and it does change the perspective on life. You're living your own life and you're only responsible for yourself and your own health and your own body, but then you think about this little one, this little vulnerable baby that you're growing, and it does change your perspective on life, doesn't it? And it sounds like that was a real formative time for you that then, I guess, led on, as you said, into your own health.
Exactly. I think it's often the way for women when they have their first child. That can often be the time when they start thinking about the kind of the eco picture, the whole climate. Oh my goodness, is there going to be anything left for my child? They start on that journey often, and they start to recognize that, usually that they want to be able to be the best self they can, because they want to birth a healthy baby, and they want to be the best parent they can. So you have to start looking at that stuff, right? If you haven't before.
Yeah, and it brings out that need to, it brings out meaning, doesn't it? And living a life that feels like it has a real focus and purpose, and we're making a difference. And your natural health and natural living work continues to this day, and like you say, has now transitioned and included the whole sober living piece. So tell us the story about that. I've heard it before, but I would love to hear it again, and I'd love to share it with everyone else, because I think not only is it inspiring, but I think a lot of people will be able to relate on one level or another, because a lot of us have complicated relationships with alcohol. And it's really interesting to hear you talk so openly about your experience. So if you'd like to share that story, it'd be lovely.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, I was just a regular mum, and so many of us get caught up in the alcohol trap, as I call it now, because it's what everyone does in the UK. We drink. You get to 18 and often people have started much earlier, but it's that rite of passage. It's what you're expected to do. Alcohol is like the social glue that sticks everything together, from celebrations to commiserations. You're meant to have a glass in hand, and then when you become a parent, it's all part of that as well. Play dates, whatever the hell, alcohol goes along with it. And I think it's so ingrained in our society that we've been led to believe, I think we've actually been purposely brainwashed into believing that there are two types of drinkers. There are those people who are at rock bottom, clinically dependent, need alcohol services, need rehab, and then there's everyone else. And everyone else are just happy social drinkers, and isn't that great? And when I first started to notice, oh, hold on a minute, I'm waking up feeling a little bit dizzy, what's going on here? how much did I drink last night? And it's only a Tuesday. The very first time I had even the first thoughts of that, I remember instantly thinking, well, but I mean, I'm not an alcoholic. There's nothing wrong with me. I'm good, just like everybody else. So you push it out of your mind, and people tend to do this for years. I certainly did. I went around the block for years. I went through phases where I stopped. I mean, I didn't drink through my pregnancies because, on some level, clearly I knew that it was not good for me, right? That, thank goodness for that gut instinct kicking in. But then, I just went straight back to drinking. There were other times when I stopped for a while and saw the benefits, saw that I felt a bit better and my skin was a bit clearer and, oh, isn't that good? And then as soon as the wine witch comes flying in, like, oh, it's, sun's out, may as well have a Sauvignon, and it all kicked in again, And that pattern went on for years and years and years and years. And for most of those years, I barely really gave it any thought because I was just doing what everyone else did. I wasn't doing anything unusual. My website, my book was called Imperfectly Natural. So, I had my out clause. I'm imperfect, right? I don't get everything right. You probably don't get everything right. That's cool. That's my vice. That's my naughty little, guilty pleasure. Or so I thought. It really ramped up when the kids were young. We had a kind of a wine bar around the corner, and that was my treat, my self-care. If someone was looking after the kids, fantastic. I can go and be all grown up and read a book and have a large glass of chilled wine, how wonderful, And I went through that absolute BS scenario for years and years. And I don't know what changed really, other than that I started waking at 3 a.m. pretty much every day. And a little voice would say, what is this? What is this? What's going on? The ceiling's spinning again. This is not right. What are you doing? You're meant to be queen of holistic living. You're meant to be authentic. You're meant to be, spiritual. You're a Hay House author. What the hell are you doing? And it would be very loud, this voice. And I would kind of answer it back and say, oh, wow. Yeah. Of course, I'll stop drinking. Obviously, I'm relatively successful. I can do stuff. I'll decide to stop drinking. So then I'd kind of make a deal with God and say, oh, if you allow me to not have a hangover, because I've got a really busy day, then I promise I won't drink again. How easy can that be? And then God would keep his side of the bargain, because I never really did have a hangover. Such was my tolerance. But then by 6 o'clock the next night, the wine witch would be in my ear and, saying, what do you mean you're not drinking? I mean, don't be ridiculous. Everyone's drinking. You've had a busy day. You deserve it. And then it literally all started again. And that went on for years. And there were occasions where I kind of reached out. There were occasions where I kind of did pause and think, actually, this really isn't okay. I mean, even if you want to believe that the government's recommended units, which personally I think is absolute BS, by the way, but even if you did want to believe that 14 units is okay, I was drinking way more than that. And it was affecting me. I felt bloated and I was terrified of getting older. I think when kind of menopausal symptoms kicked in, that was a big lesson. And I remember one day kind of thinking, God, I've got nothing to look forward to. Nothing, I'm going to look worse. I'm going to feel worse. Everything's going to go south. I'm going to get sick. And I remember feeling so down and thinking, what can I do? What can I do? Shall I, go to a boot camp? I was thinking about all these possibilities, but managing to avoid the one thing that would have, actually made the difference. But I think a part of me knew. And so I would occasionally ask people if I trusted them. So I might go and see therapists, or I remember going to lots of therapists because the work that I did, I was fortunate enough to often get invited to review things. So I would often see really amazing therapists. I'd have incredible treatments or have this amazing therapy, whether it was energy healing or aromatherapy or whatever. And sometimes I would say afterwards, can I ask you about something else? Because I'm a bit worried, I'm kind of drinking every day and I'm a bit worried about it. And in every single case, they would say to me, well, you seem fine, I drink as well, just have the odd alcohol-free day. If I had a quid for everyone who said, have an alcohol-free day, like I hadn't thought of that, right? And, it's not their fault. They didn't know. And similarly, when I went to the GP, I only ever went to the GP, once in a blue moon, but I went for a vitamin D test. And she was a very friendly nurse who kind of gave me the results. And then I asked her on the way out the door, or doctor, I'm worried about drinking. And she sort of looked at me and said, well, you look fine. How much are you drinking? So obviously I lied. I mean, who wouldn't? And she just sort of said, oh, well, you seem fine. Have an alcohol-free day. And so that kept me stuck for another 5 years, and this just went on and on, until it didn't, until I came across a book. I was given a book because we, on Radio 2, we were interviewing authors or whatever. And usually if you work in radio, you're really lucky if you get a book the night before you're interviewing somebody. But in this instance, it was Christmas time. And I was we were sort of finishing for 2 weeks. And the producer handed me this book and said, oh, you've got a couple of weeks to read this one because the author is coming in on the 4th of Jan or whatever. And I looked at the title. It was The Sober Diaries, Claire Pooley's book. I looked at the title and in that instant, I knew in that moment that was going to be it. I just knew. So of course I didn't read it till after Christmas. I didn't want to spoil my Christmas. And then literally on Boxing Day, I started reading the book. And there in that book was Claire's story. And that was the very first time I had ever encountered anyone just like me. So professional person, got kids, not at rock bottom, not requiring rehab, fully functioning, going to work, doing the stuff she has to do, not driving under the influence, none of those scary, awful things, not sitting in a skip or pouring vodka on cornflakes, but absolutely damaging her health and well-being and recognizing it has to stop. And it was just absolutely incredible to me, and I just really got inspired by this. And I thought, well, at the very least, I'll stop till Claire comes in to the studio. So I stopped drinking on the 30th of December, 2017. And that was it, never look back. What I found in that book was just that access to that whole world that's out there of people who are choosing to be alcohol free. They're not waiting till they hit rock bottom. They're choosing to be alcohol free. And if only, well, of course now more and more people are talking about it, but it had to take me that long before I ever heard this message that life is better without, right? Life is better without. No one had ever said that to me. It was always, the thinking was always, oh dear, poor you. Oh, you don't feel so good. Well, if just have a night off and then you can get back to it, or whatever. So yeah, it just spun everything on its head, really.
So interesting. You're so right about how it's pervasive everywhere, isn't it? It's so socially, it's the only socially acceptable drug.
Well, yeah, I mean,
there's
that lovely line that was first coined by Jason Vale of alcohol is the only drug we have to justify not taking.
Yes. Yeah. Isn't that amazing? And even though you weren't at rock bottom, but you were suffering enough for you to go out and ask people and ask all those therapists, ask the nurse or the GP, what can I do? Should I cut down? And the constant message was, don't worry, you're okay. Exactly. This is normal. Everybody drinks.
I mean, I think looking back, it's one of the things that it's one of my real passions is to try to encourage the medical profession and therapists to just have an understanding that there is another world out there. We're not asking them to stop drinking. I mean, they're probably drinking themselves. That's up to them. It's not about being judgmental or doing anything yourself. All that's needed all I really needed to have happen was for one of those therapists, or certainly the GP, to be able to say to me, oh, well, this is obviously important for you. You've obviously noticed this. Well done for noticing it. Let me just signpost you to, X or Y, the Sober Club or whatever, because my understanding is there's a whole bunch of people who choose to be alcohol free. So let me signpost you there. That's all that needed to be said, right? Rather than, the sense of, oh dear, poor you can't hold your beer. Oh dear, which is crazy.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it was the book. The book was the one that came along for you and gave you
It was.
permission.
It really did. It really just opened my eyes to another whole world that I had no idea existed. No idea.
Yeah, because like you said at the start, we've always thought it was the rock bottom alcoholics that desperately do need help. And if they went to their GP, it would be, yes, here we go, here's your support and you need it. And then everyone else, but that everyone else is a wide spectrum.
Well, absolutely. That's this term grey area drinkers that
Yeah.
was coined by Jolene Park. It's not black or white. It is a spectrum. And, lots of people who drink are somewhere on that spectrum. And, my thing is, well, why would you not get off the booze elevator now if you have an opportunity to? Unless alcohol's not a problem for you, because I'm not up for prohibition. If someone's very happy, that's absolutely fine. So I never say to somebody, oh, how much are you drinking, or you should stop. I just simply say, ask yourself the question, could my life be better physically and emotionally without alcohol? And if the answer to that is no, I'm good, then great, you're good. But if the answer deep down is, yeah, I know my life will be better physically and emotionally without alcohol, then you absolutely, want to give it a try.
Yeah, it's giving that space for self-reflection, isn't it? Self-inquiry.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because although I've asked you for advice on alcohol-free drinks, I know along the way I haven't told you what's happened since I met you, Janey.
Oh, okay.
And it was very interesting because I count myself as very much in that everyone else area, and alcohol not being a problem. In fact, I've never been drunk in my whole life, which I know is quite unusual. I've never been, ill through drinking or lost my memory or anything like that, because I don't like the feeling that alcohol gives me. But I still would be a social drinker, just like you say, every occasion, every excuse, and I'd be the first one to say, oh yeah, I will have a glass of wine if we're going to the pub on a sunny day or whatever. Even if everyone else was having soft drinks, I'd still be the one with a glass of wine. But it was through meeting and talking to you and mutual friends that we have that are also sober, and other friends. I just, like you say, it's a growing movement right now, isn't it? And a lot of people waking up to this, that you have a choice. And I don't know, it's just my subconscious just took in all this information, and I just went off alcohol. I just stopped drinking. I didn't want to. It felt repulsive. It didn't feel nice anymore. It didn't feel like a treat anymore. And I noticed that every weekend when we were sharing a bottle of wine, my husband would pour mine and he'd drunk his, or he was on to the second or third glass, and mine was still full. And I just wasn't enjoying it anymore. And then I realized, actually, I'm just going to stop, because it almost felt like my body was rejecting it, and I'd kind of known this my whole life. Even as a child, I didn't like people who were drunk, and it always felt quite scary. But I just carried on because it's what everyone does. Everyone has a drink with celebrations and to relax, and at the end of a work week or whatever. But yeah, it's opened up my eyes, I think, being around people who have chosen not to drink without them having a problem.
Exactly. I mean, the thing is, I suppose yeah, I mean, that's fantastic that's happened to you. And I think you're absolutely right. The energy of alcohol is terrible. It's a depressant. We think of it as, a reward, but actually alcohol is a depressant. And, if you want to think of it from an energetic perspective, alcohol's got a terribly low vibration, and it's really hard to kind of raise your energy and to kind of feel aligned with stuff when you're drinking. Of course, I realise that now, and didn't at the time. But, if you'd asked me back then, even though on the surface I was doing all of this energetic work and spiritual stuff, the reality of it was I was bringing myself down all the time, literally poisoning myself. It's literally toxic. It's as simple as that. So, your body is obviously very intuitive, because it knew that you didn't need it. Nobody needs it. Nobody needs alcohol. It has zero benefits. Not one. Nobody needs even one single glass, because it literally has zero benefits. And that's such a hard message to get across, because it's been so ingrained in us that we need alcohol to socialize, to feel confident, to feel, relaxed. Absolute BS.
Yeah, there isn't a single benefit to our physical health for sure. How about the side where you, and this is what I'm kind of facing now. Now I've made this decision, it feels like, even though it kind of happened without me consciously making a decision, it now feels like it's a decision. Um, but I feel there's kind of a sense of loss of some things though, you know, those social, like you say, the social connections, or um, me and my husband used to go to like a local wine bar and do their wine tasting flights of wines and things like that. And I was thinking, oh, I'm never going to do that again. You know, it's
Mm.
like that's something that won't be a part of my life again. And part of me is going, well, that's good because you don't want to be drinking those toxins. And that is how I'm seeing it now. And the other part is like just a sense of kind of loss in a way. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
Like
it does.
of the
And I
kind of,
think, yeah, I think there is an element of it's okay to acknowledge the part that alcohol played in your life. So you can grieve that. You can see that as a sense of loss, if you like. Sometimes even people write a letter to alcohol, you know, like, well, thank you for being part of my life. I can see that you were, you know, I needed your protection or support or whatever for a time. But you know what? Right now, I don't anymore. Goodbye. You know, it can be quite powerful. But when it comes to the social situations, and you mention that you might not be going certain places or whatever. I'll come on to the wine tasting in a moment. But if you're talking about, you might not be doing certain things with your husband or whatever, I think what we have to remember is it was never about the alcohol. If you were having a good time, you were having a good time with people you loved or wanted to be with, despite the alcohol, not because of it. It's not physically possible that because of something going in your mouth, you had a better time. You would have had a worse time, actually, if you were to watch a video back of yourself. We have this idea that we're wonderful party animals, when we're drinking, like, oh, we're fabulously, upbeat. And so actually, that's BS too. Most of us, if we were actually to look back at videos of ourselves a little bit tipsy, it's not a pretty sight, actually. I'd much rather, have full have all my capacities, as it were, full control of who I am. I've never met anyone who preferred themselves drunk, let's put it that way, or preferred themselves when they were drinking. Because when you do stop and you properly set those intentions and you're not going to drink again, magical things start to happen. They really do. You actually do start to come back to who you really are, because you're no longer putting the poison in, right? Even if it was a relatively small amount of poison. Sometimes people will go, well, one glass can't do any good. And then, of course, if I want to be really facetious, I'll say, well, would you say, oh, it's only a bit of heroin? It's like, you wouldn't, would you? It's highly toxic. That's the reality of it, I'm not trying to be judgmental because I'm not, because I was absolutely bought into all of that. I loved all those articles that used to say, oh, a glass of red wine is good for the heart. Oh, great, I'll have a bottle of Sauvignon. I devoured those articles. But actually, the reality is it has zero benefits, and even one glass is toxic. That's the truth of it. So, you have literally nothing to lose and everything to gain. Now, when it comes to the wine tasting, I mean, again, it's the atmosphere, it's the nice place that you're going to. It's not the tasting of something toxic and then spitting it out. Really? Like, how horrible is that? Actually, when you think about it, what even is that? When I think back to that stuff I used to do, spitting, gobbing a bit of wine into a bucket. Oh, for God's sake, it's horrible. I'm sorry, but it's like, I see it all completely differently now. The emperor's not wearing any clothes, really. Go somewhere else nice, go and have a nice meal, or let your husband taste the wine and you stand there smugly with a glass of something alcohol-free. I know which one I'd rather be. You're not having a good time because of the toxic liquid you're putting in. You might be having a good time despite it, but not because of it.
Yeah, that all makes perfect sense. And you're right. And it's almost like the whole world opens up then, because you're looking at social events and places you can go. And like you say, looking
Yeah.
at the food rather
Yeah,
than,
exactly.
yeah.
And also, the world is changing, thank goodness, not fast enough, but things are changing. And we've had members in the Sober Club who've been on wine tasting event, like to a vineyard. And they've been so panicky because they've been going with a group to a vineyard. But, those places are not stupid. They know that someone's going to be a driver, so they provide something different. So what? You might be pregnant. You might not be drinking for other reasons. You might be on medication. It's utterly crazy that everything has to revolve around every single person taking in poison.
I love how passionate you are, Janey, and that's why it's rubbed off on me. It's been fascinating. Now, I know this has now shaped your work, as you've touched on the Sober Club and the TED Talk. There's a lot. It's taken you in so many directions. It's been another turning point in your life, really, hasn't it? At this point,
it really has.
That book that dropped on your desk, and here you are today. So, tell us about what that's meant for you professionally. Like, what are you doing in your work related to the sober?
Yeah, so I mean, I'm so passionate about sharing this message. I really am. The message that life is better without. It's a wholly positive message that I'm trying to share. Other people can do the, oh, how terrible everything is, but I don't need to do that. I'm just sharing why don't you choose this, because life is better. And it really is that missing piece of the holistic jigsaw, if you like, because, all those years I was stepping around that elephant in the room. Actually, I now realize that's the key. It's so much more than just not drinking. It's literally the key that lays the foundations for everything else. From that place, you can deal with everything else. You become more resilient, you have more energy, you have more clarity, you have more sense of purpose. You actually can start to like yourself. That's a massive one, of course, because most of us don't really very much, do we? Low self-esteem, it's like an epidemic. But when you've stopped drinking, when you've stopped poisoning yourself, you can then become open to liking yourself a bit more. So they're the messages I want to share. So yeah, I run the Sober Club, which is a membership platform. And we have a kind of private group and we have a course, but I also offer coaching. I also like you, do EFT and matrix reimprinting and various other modalities within coaching. And what I'm now doing, which is super exciting, is training people to be holistic sober coaches. So, and that came about literally by accident, really, because a bunch of Sober Club, I think I had 3 emails in the space of about 3 weeks. That's when the universe is telling you something, right? And the emails all kind of said, oh, I'm interested in training to be a sober coach. Can you send me some info? So I sent each of these people the information for the women that I trained with in the States. And then they all wrote back and said, oh, no, I meant with you. Oh, okay. Wow, hadn't thought of that, but makes absolute sense because I want to do it holistically. So it's not just a case of, okay, let's support people through 30 days of sobriety. It's the holistic picture. So that, the training that I do offer includes really in-depth nutrition and mindset and trauma and all the rest of it. So so that's what I'm doing. I absolutely love it. It's tiny groups and there's a lot of kind of one-to-one involvement with me, so we're a little bit of a family, but that's nice. So it's really exciting work.
I love that you've created your own brand of sober coach training as well, taking all your holistic living experience from all those years. And yeah, it just shows how multi-layered we all are, and you can bring all these experiences through to create something new that is needed now more than ever. So I'm guessing you're pretty in demand because this is a growing movement, isn't it? Well, people are waking up.
It is
listening to these conversations.
I know it is, and it's really exciting how it's growing actually. And you alluded to alcohol-free drinks, and one of my mantras is keep the ritual, change the ingredients. As adults, we do like to come home and sit outside or whatever and have something nice in a nice glass. A cup of tea won't always cut it. A warm orange juice or a Coke. I'm not 12. I want something nice in a nice glass, right? So the fact that there are more and more alcohol-free drinks available, there's more people talking about this stuff, there are more opportunities to socialize, which doesn't have to involve alcohol. It's super exciting. It really is. Things are definitely changing.
Definitely. And I love the positive, joyful slant that you bring to this. What is it you're gaining rather than what you're losing? And
I won't let anyone use the phrase give up.
No.
And you didn't. Very well done.
Didn't I? Brilliant. I got points for that.
Yeah, exactly. Because our unconscious mind thinks we're losing something. We're a little bit deprived. You're like, oh, I'm missing out. No, there's nothing to miss out on and everything to gain.
And you have gained so much in each of your iterations of your career, I can see that you're very passionate, and you play full out and you explore it and create new things along the way. It's been amazing to hear about that and watch what you're doing now. And the one question that I ask all my guests, and I think we've touched on it here and there as well, is what brings you joy, Janey? What brings you joy in life?
Well, I think being able to inspire others to live their best life very definitely brings me joy. It really is the thing that that makes the difference for me. You know, if I can just inspire just one person to go after their dream, you know, or get themselves well, or whatever, then then I've done my work, as it were. So that's what really brings me joy. But in terms of, I don't know if you want a kind of a actual physical thing, but that would be walking by the sea, which I don't get to do often enough. But when I finally do, that's where I recharge my batteries.
Yeah, we're a bit landlocked here in Hertfordshire, aren't we?
There is that problem. There is. I'm working on it. At the moment, I just have to diarise a trip, you know, even if it's a train to Brighton. Something has to happen.
Beautiful. Thank you. And how can our listeners find you and learn more about your work and listen to your podcast? Tell us where to find you.
I'm very easy to find. It's at Janey Lee Grace across all social media. It's thesoberclub.com. So it's very easy to find. And the podcast is called Alcohol Free Life. And I have some amazing guests and experts and inspiring people on there. So yeah, have a listen.
Yeah, it's a brilliant podcast. I've been listening a lot myself recently. And
thank you.
Thank you so much for being on my podcast.
Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you for listening to the Fertile Mindset podcast. Please rate and review, and remember to follow or subscribe on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you are listening. Now, if this conversation has sparked something within you and you want to live your life with clarity, purpose, and joy, then I would love you to sign up for my Daily Seeds emails. They're delivered to you each day, giving you messages of support and planting seeds of inspiration. You'll also receive welcome gifts from me, including an EFT tuition video and some of my favourite tapping exercises to clear overwhelm, reduce stress, help you focus, and more, all completely free of charge. I'll also keep in touch with you about upcoming events and support that I think you'll like. Go to fertilemindset.com/dailyseeds to sign up. And I'll see you again next week for another episode of the Fertile Mindset podcast.